Deep within Ocarina of Time's sacred forest meadow lies the Forest Temple, a mansion-like structure filled to the brim with puzzles and dangerous foes. It's here that the hero of time would search for his childhood friend Saria, a Kokiri destined for greatness, as she is revealed to be one of the 6 sages yet to be awakened. After navigating through the complex labyrinth and its deadly traps, one final challenge lies between the hero and his goal, the evil spirit from beyond, Phantom Ganon. While taking after the appearance of the Gerudo Cane, Phantom Ganon is merely a creation of Ganondorf, acting as the boss of the Forest Temple. The fight itself is quite unique, as Phantom Ganon will merge with the Paintains and must be shot at with the fairy bow. His next phase is a match of Dead Man's Volley with the hero, which also acts as foreshadowing to the real fight against Ganondorf. Once defeated, Ganondorf berates the ghost and banishes it to the gap between dimensions. Phantom Ganon reappears in The Wind Waker, where he duels the hero on his second visit to the Forsaken Fortress. A final battle between the two takes place at Ganon's Tower, and Phantom Ganon is eventually defeated by the divine powers of the Light Arrows. Some other minor appearances of Phantom Ganon include Four Sword Adventures and Hyrule Warriors Legends. What makes Phantom Ganon so interesting is that, for one, he appears in multiple Zelda games, and second, the information given to us, whether it be dialogue, texture details, or unused content, is more than enough to build a theory off of. In today's video, we'll be looking at the different appearances of Phantom Ganon and how it fits into the lore of the series. Instead of looking at this video as one big theory, it's better to view it as a bunch of smaller theories loosely strung together. But before I begin, I do want to thank the following individuals, as they either provided translations or helped with gathering information to use in this video. While Phantom Ganon has made multiple appearances in the Zelda timeline, the 2 games I'll be primarily focusing on are Wind Waker and Ocarina of Time. As the name suggests, this entity is meant to be a phantom version of Ganondorf himself. Translations taken from the Japanese versions of Wind Waker and Ocarina of Time also show that they too refer to these beings as Phantom Ganons. Quite often, the Zelda series will reuse characters or enemies without them being the same individuals of past games. Link and Zelda are the 2 best examples of this, but it also applies to side characters such as Impa or Beetle. A lot of times, these characters are meant to be reincarnated versions, and therefore have their own personalities or a sense of individuality. One of the first questions I had about Phantom Ganon was a simple one. Are we to believe that the one featured in Ocarina of Time is the same as Wind Waker's? What's by far the most interesting detail about Ocarina of Time's Phantom Ganon is what Ganondorf says following the fight. He's angered by the ghost's performance in battle, stating that he'll banish it to the gap between dimensions. Similar phrasing is used in the Japanese version of the game, leading many people to question what exactly the gap between dimensions, or gap of dimensions, is. One bit of text that slightly differs from the original comes from Phantom Ganon's boss description. In the English version, he's described as an evil spirit from beyond, whereas the Japanese version translates to evil spirit from another dimension, which implies that Phantom Ganon was created in a dimension outside of Hyrule's. But what dimension is the game referring to? The first area that comes to mind is wherever Phantom Ganon gets banished to. However, if it's described as a gap within dimensions, then it's not a dimension. One possible answer comes from another game in the series, A Link Between Worlds, which also happens to be one of my favorites. Whenever the player travels between the worlds of Hyrule and Lorule, a short cinematic plays out of them walking through a mysterious realm. One could say that this space is the gap between both Hyrule and Lorule. A gap between dimensions, perhaps? This is the part of the video where I'd like to give a shout out to this Reddit post, which theorizes about the gap between dimensions being connected to the Dark Realm and how it connects to the creation of the world and Triforce. It has nothing to do with this video, I just wanted to address it because it's an interesting take on the whole gap between dimensions thing. With that said, there's one key detail about Wind Waker's Phantom Ganon which makes this mystery all the more intriguing. The weapon he uses includes Hylian text, which, once translated, spells out the words Zubora and Gabora. These are names for the swordsmiths who upgrade Link's blade and Majora's Mask, and it's the only game of the series which they make an appearance in. The fact that Wind Waker's Phantom Ganon uses a weapon with names of characters seen in a completely different timeline makes you question how he got his hands on this weapon in the first place.
Oh my gosh, is that a Zonai squirrel?
So, this is where things start to get messy. If the location described by Ganondorf was intended to be the same as what's seen in A Link Between Worlds, does this gap between dimensions transcend not only space, but also time? Is it possible that, once banished to the gap between dimensions, Phantom Ganon found his way to Termina, later reappearing in the Wind Waker and battling the hero? Ganondorf is the one who sends his Phantom to the gap between dimensions, however we know that Phantom Ganon himself holds a similar sort of power, as he can freely enter and exit the worlds within paintings. And the portal which the boss enters and exits is the same as the one created by Ganondorf following the battle, which does add some credibility to this theory. While the designs of both entities are vastly different, they are meant to be Phantom versions of Ganondorf, and it's made clear that the one featured in Wind Waker is the same one that was defeated and sealed away by the Hero of Time. So it's not outside the realm of possibility to believe that both Phantom Ganons are of the same entity. Another connection comes from the similarity of certain attacks and abilities. Both Wind Waker and Ocarina of Times are able to make fake copies of themselves and fire projectiles that can be hit back towards them by the player. As a side note, while Wind Waker's Phantom Ganon uses this attack, the same can't be said for Ganondorf himself. Instead, he chooses to fight you head-on with blades, which is a huge contrast to Ocarina of Time's Ganondorf. It almost feels like this was intentional, as it shows that Ganondorf learned from his past mistakes when fighting the Hero of Time, but that's probably me overthinking stuff. One other detail I'd like to point out comes from the designs of both Phantom Ganons. If you look closely, you'll see that Wind Waker's version has a skeletal arm and leg, not unlike what you'd see on Stalfos-type enemies. Meanwhile, Ocarina of Time's Phantom Ganon wears a skeletal mask on its head. It's one of the more could-be-a-coincidence sort of connections, but it's worth pointing out at least. Ultimately, this theory comes down to how seriously you take the gap between dimensions quote, as well as what's written on Phantom Ganon's sword. It could simply be a reference only put there for the player to find, kind of similar to that Breath of the Wild picture in Twilight Princess HD. Another question that arises from this whole mystery are the circumstances which lead to Phantom Ganon's creation. We already know that these were created by the Gerudo King Ganondorf, but I also believe that their origins hold even more secrets that are yet to be uncovered, specifically Ocarina of Time's Phantom Ganon. But before that, I do want to talk a bit more about Wind Waker's version. Partway through the story, it's revealed that the Master Sword acted as a key to the seal on Ganondorf and his magic, a seal which was broken once the hero withdrew the blade, and Phantom Ganon only makes an appearance on the second visit to the Forsaken Fortress, an event taking place immediately after Link acquires the Master Sword. I theorize that this is why we only see Phantom Ganon after the events of Hyrule Castle, because the magic used to create it was part of the magic that was sealed away. One thing worth noting is that the Japanese translations mention nothing of Ganondorf's magic being sealed, only his demon tribe. In fact, we find out early on that the Gerudo King does have access to some magic, since prior to obtaining Nehru's Pearl, he curses the ocean with an endless night. Now, this would debunk the theory, however you can argue that Phantom Ganon is part of this demon tribe referenced by Ganondorf. With that said, this is where things start to take a more interesting turn. You see, there's one key detail regarding Ocarina of Time's Phantom Ganon, which may give us all the answers we need in regards to what it is and where it came from. The way the cutscene plays out just before the boss fight is the very same as Link's first encounter with Ganondorf. Everything here is nearly identical, from the around-the-shoulder camera movement to Ganondorf's posing, even the choice in music. It all plays out exactly the same. The second piece to this puzzle comes from unused text found within the game. According to the developer notes, this piece of dialogue was going to be said by Phantom Ganon himself. It references a gap between dreams and reality. Now, one could argue that this place is the same that's mentioned by Ganondorf, but you could also interpret this as a different realm altogether. Recall what I brought up earlier in the video, how Phantom Ganon is described as an evil spirit from another dimension. While I did provide my own opinion for why this couldn't be the gap between dimensions, I never gave an answer as to what dimension the game was referring to. But with these recent discoveries, it's very plausible that the reason Phantom Ganon takes on this appearance has to do with Link's dreams. not only because of the direct parallels between both cutscenes, but also due to the fact that this initial encounter with Ganondorf was foreshadowed in the hero's nightmares, something that is shown to us at the very beginning of the game. Here's something to consider. What if the boss fight was initially planned to take place in Link's dreams? It would explain why the evil spirit takes the form of Ganondorf, as well as that gap between dreams and reality line. With all that said, one valid point brought up by theorist CuccoLover is how the Forest Temple itself also fits the criteria of a place between dreams and reality, with corridors that twist, completely changing the dungeon's layout, and ghosts that can hide within paintings similar to Phantom Ganon. Is this place really in Hyrule, or some other dimension altogether? One that bends reality as we know it? If we're to believe that Phantom Ganon is directly tied to Link's nightmares, and that the arena itself is somehow connected to all this, it's eerily similar to another strange location the player visits in another game, Breath of the Wild's Illusory Realm. A quote from Maz Koshia gives us more information on this area. "This illusory realm was created from the depths of your memories. The enemy you shall face is a product of the fear that dwells within. You must overcome this fear to proceed." You could even argue that the gaps between dreams and reality line perfectly encapsulates the illusory realm. Each fight takes place in a reality that feels almost identical to Hyrule's, but it's still a dream. None of this actually exists, even though it feels just as real as the actual battles against the Blights. At the very least, I do believe that Phantom Ganon is supposed to be a manifestation of Link's nightmares, though. It makes so much sense in the context of things. On the topic of Breath of the Wild, this leads to another question. Are the Blights also classified as versions of Phantom Ganon? Probably, but I do want to go more in depth with this idea since there's a lot to unpack here. The first major clue can be found in the Hyrule Compendium entries for each of the Blights. Each one is described as a phantom of Ganon, and this same phrasing is used in both Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker. The Japanese version of the compendium is slightly different, using the word bunshin when referencing the Blights. Bunshin meaning other self / part of oneself / alter ego. This is one bit of information which sort of makes me question whether the Blights truly are Phantom Ganons or not, and that's because of what happens following the Hero of Time's battle in the Forest Temple. It's made clear in Breath of the Wild that the Blights are parts of Calamity Ganon. Even if you skip the Divine Beasts and head straight to Hyrule Castle, you're forced to fight each one before taking on the final boss. If Phantom Ganon was merely a clone, why banish it to the gap between dimensions? By doing so, it gives me the impression that Ocarina of Time's Phantom Ganon is its own individual, therefore different from the Blights. This isn't me trying to say that this is definitive evidence against the theory, I'm just bringing up some potential differences between the two. With that said, there is one possible explanation for this. Design-wise, Wind Waker's Phantom Ganon is very similar to Calamity Ganon, as in the one we see flying around Hyrule Castle, both of them sharing spectral-like traits. And remember that while the Blights are described as clones, they are clones of Calamity Ganon, and it's revealed that Calamity Ganon is different from Ganondorf, who is believed to be sealed deep below Hyrule Castle. And the way Calamity Ganon acts in Breath of the Wild definitely makes it feel like it's its own individual, similar to Ocarina of Time's Phantom Ganon. Therefore, Calamity Ganon itself could very well be classified as a version of Phantom Ganon. Am I overthinking things? Absolutely. Do I care? Pfft, not really. Now, before we wrap up this video, I want to leave you all with a question. It's something that I myself haven't been able to answer. Given what we've discussed, is Agahnim from A Link to the Past a sort of Phantom Ganon? At the end of the game, Ganon reveals that Agahnim was his alter ego, which is kind of similar to the description of the Blights. And he too has abilities such as cloning himself and hurling energy balls toward the player. As far as I'm concerned, while Agahnim does share similarities to Phantom Ganon's, in this case, it's different, because once you defeat the wizard, a faint image of Ganon appears before transforming into a bat and flying away, and in doing so, leaves behind the body. Perhaps it was Ganon's soul which took over a random person's body to use as a vessel since he himself was trapped in the Dark World. Or he may have possessed an artificial body to use, kind of like Zelda in Spirit Tracks. If this was a Phantom Ganon, I doubt there would have been any bodies left after the battle. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. One last connection worth bringing up is how the Phantom Riders in Twilight Princess remind me of the designs of Ocarina of Time's Phantom Ganon. I had nowhere else to put this, so I thought I'd briefly mention it here. That's going to be it for today's video. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. It felt really good to do another Zelda theory, and a quick reminder to subscribe if you want to see more. I am planning to do a Horizon Forbidden West lore video soon, along with more Zelda videos, assuming that I can think of some unique topics to cover. I do have some ideas, so I guess I'll see where those take me. I've been NintendoBlackCrisis, and I'll see you all next time.